Since its founding in 1908, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has been the United States' top law enforcement agency. We all know many of the details of the Bureau's famous history. They've taken on everything from gangsters and organized crime to video piracy, and have even had to withstand direct attacks from more than one US president. But the Bureau's history is so long and their jurisdiction so wide that more than a few less than flattering details go unremembered by the general public. Here are 10 of the more outrageous stories and interesting details you probably didn't know about the FBI. The cryptocurrency known as Bitcoin has been big news in recent months. Its value exploded in 2017 before settling back down to more reasonable levels, and some are speculating that it's a bubble just waiting to burst. But if you've ever wondered just how gigantic Bitcoin wallets can get, then wonder no more. At one point, the FBI held the largest single wallet in the world. After the seizure of online drug emporium Silk Road in 2013, the Bureau seized an eye-popping 144,000 Bitcoins, which they auctioned off in 2017 for a whopping $48 million. Of course, if they had only waited for another couple of months, they likely could have gotten over 10 times more, but it's still a pretty substantial payday for Uncle Sam. It's well known that former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was a man who could hold a grudge, and he had a deep personal dislike for famed civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. The Bureau famously had a thick file on Dr. King, having begun surveillance on him in 1963 due to the perceived threat to national security that he represented. Indeed, the Bureau were able to obtain some salacious dirt on King, including audio recordings of sexual activity with a mistress, and what they chose to do with those recordings is truly appalling. Days after Hoover publicly denounced King as the most notorious liar in the country in a speech, King received a typewritten letter along with a recording of his sexual dalliance. The letter berated King for his immoral conduct, claimed to have more evidence of said conduct than just the included recording, and strongly implied that King should kill himself. According to his friends, King immediately suspected the FBI of writing the letter, and just over a decade later, long after King's death, that suspicion was confirmed by a Senate Intelligence Committee. To this day, the letter is seen as an example of the FBI's capacity to overstep its bounds and abuse its authority. Comey even kept a copy of the initial wiretap order on King on his desk to remind him of just that. The FBI keeps a lot of files on a lot of people, and particularly during the Hoover era, many of those people were well-known celebrities. John Lennon famously had a thick file, as did many other counterculture figures whom the Bureau suspected of attempting to corrupt America's youth, including The Doors' Jim Morrison, Godfather of Soul James Brown, and the Grateful Dead's Jerry Garcia. But not all of these files pertain to potential wrongdoings by their subjects, and some of them were downright boring. For example, the FBI's file on Liberace mainly detailed attempts to extort the famed singer by threatening to expose his sexuality. Similar attempts at extortion formed the bulk of the Bureau's files on rappers Tupac Shakur and Eazy-E. Other celebrities' files have mostly to do with criminal investigations around them, such as Michael Jackson's child molestation trials, and others, like those of Princess Grace Kelly of Monaco and guitar legend Jimi Hendrix, simply go nowhere, containing virtually no information at all. The FBI's fascination with celebrities and pop culture trendsetters goes back a long way, as we'll discuss in more detail shortly. It's necessarily tough to become an FBI agent. Potential hirees must have a 4-year degree from an accredited college, have 3 years of relevant law enforcement experience, and qualify under one of 5 special agent entry programs, in addition to passing an extensive background check and drug test. But one certain qualification makes it plain that the FBI is just not a very big fan of marijuana. Even though the green stuff has been legal for both medical and recreational use in various states for years, potential FBI agents must not have partaken of marijuana, whether legal or not, in any way, shape, or form for the past 3 years. This detail briefly became news in 2014, when then FBI Director James Comey told the Wall Street Journal that the Bureau was having a tough time staffing its cybercrimes division, because it was difficult to find young, talented hackers who didn't smoke weed, implying that he was thinking about a change to the policy. After a public tongue-lashing from then-Senator Jeff Sessions, Comey later backtracked and said that he had only been joking, and that the 3-year ban would stay in place, which to this day it has. The short-lived DeLorean Motor Company is still remembered today for its stainless steel vehicles with gull-wing doors, made famous by the Back to the Future film series. Its founder, John DeLorean, was a rising star in the automotive industry throughout the 1970s, and as the youngest ever head of General Motors, he helped turn the Chevrolet brand from a dismal failure to a bestseller. But the powerful auto industry wasn't a fan of DeLorean's solo venture, and his former employers did everything they could to keep the upstart company from turning a profit. Plagued with financial problems, DeLorean suddenly found himself in the center of one of the biggest scandals in FBI history. Undercover agents proposed to DeLorean that he solve his money woes by becoming involved in a massive cocaine trafficking operation, stuffing the interiors of his car's doors with the drug before shipping the vehicles to overseas markets. When the scheme came to light, DeLorean insisted that he had never wanted to be a part of any such operation, but that the undercover agents had forced his continued participation by, among other things, threatening his family with harm. His defense may have fallen on deaf ears if not for an unlikely ally, Hustler magazine publisher Larry Flynt, who managed to obtain audio recordings proving that the entire scheme had been cooked up by government agents, and that the cocaine had actually been provided by the FBI in one of the most egregious entrapment cases in U.S. history. Nearly 2 years after his arrest for drug trafficking, DeLorean was acquitted of all the charges against him in federal court in August 1984. Actor James Woods has a different tale to tell about his experience with the FBI. In mid-2001, Woods was en route from Boston to LA when he observed 4 suspicious-looking men on his flight. The passengers, all of Middle Eastern origin, sat bolt upright for the entire flight without eating, drinking, or speaking to anybody. And Woods found their behavior so unnerving that he reported them to authorities on the ground once the plane had landed. The FBI now believes that this flight was a dry run for the attacks of September 11th, which were carried out less than a month later. As the dust was beginning to settle on the worst terrorist attack ever to be carried out on American soil, Woods directly contacted the Bureau to tell them of his experience. He was visited at his home the following day by federal agents, and while Woods has never publicly divulged what was discussed, it's likely that he was able to provide some valuable information. Woods later recognized 2 of the men he saw in the pictures of the hijackers that were made public, and he has said that he has since heard through unofficial channels that the other 2 were directly involved as well. Perhaps the largest intelligence failure in American history, the activities of former FBI agent Robert Hansen hit the agency where it hurt, and continues to have repercussions today. Hansen was employed with the Bureau from 1976 until 2001, and for the bulk of that time, from 1979 onward, he was leading a double life as one of the most prolific and successful double agents of all time. During that period, Hansen used his position and reputation within the Bureau as a computer expert to steal and pass along untold volumes of intelligence to the Soviet Union and later Russia, somehow managing to escape detection for over 2 decades. Many of the wounds inflicted by Hansen's activities, such as the outing of American intelligence agents who had infiltrated the KGB, would later be blamed on Aldrich Ames, a CIA agent who was also busily selling state secrets to the Soviets for much of the same time. But after Ames' capture and arrest in 1994, Hansen remained active, and his betrayal only came to light after disgruntled Russian agents supplied American intelligence with a tape-recorded conversation between Hansen and a KGB agent that had taken place in 1986. After a brief investigation, Hansen was arrested for espionage, and only avoided the death penalty by cooperating with officials to estimate the amount of the damage he had done. Hansen is currently housed at the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, under solitary confinement for 23 hours out of each day, serving 15 consecutive life sentences. To this day, he maintains that there was no political or ideological motive for his actions. He was motivated purely by profit. Since the attacks, the FBI has made successful use of informants to ferret out and squash countless other terrorist plots. But one such scheme wasn't quite so successful. In 2010, it was found that the Bureau had sent an undercover informant to infiltrate a popular mosque in Irvine, California, even after they had publicly assured the local Muslim community that they wouldn't do any such thing. Convicted forger Craig Montel posed as Farouk al-Aziz to spy on the mosque's worshippers and gauge potential support among them for terrorist activities. The operation backfired in the worst possible way, as the informant's targets were so alarmed by his constant talk of violent jihad that they reported him to the FBI. Although Montel had gotten one man to agree with him on video that perhaps they should blow up some buildings, any case the Bureau may have built against him collapsed when the informant's activities became known. Montel went public with many of the FBI's methods for rooting out suspected terrorists, many of which come scarily close to entrapment, and he even filed a lawsuit against the Bureau over the whole operation, which in the end only exacerbated tensions between California's Muslim community and federal law enforcement. Many of these types of intelligence gaffes can be traced back to a culture that began with J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO, or Counterintelligence Program, which the FBI successfully concealed from the public from 1956 until 1971. The aforementioned harassment of Martin Luther King and the detailed files on various counterculture types were a part of this program, and those examples only scratch the surface. The program was originally intended to root out communist sympathizers during the Red Scare of the 1950s, but eventually came to be used as a tool for digging into the private lives of anybody the Bureau deemed subversive. While civil rights organizations and leaders such as King and Malcolm X were frequent targets, so were the Ku Klux Klan, anti-war and religious groups, the Socialist Workers' Party, and many others. The program was brought to light when a left-wing activist group known as the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI burgled a bureau office and stole over 1,000 classified documents, then promptly leaked them to the press. Congressional investigations would later conclude that many of the activities of the FBI under COINTELPRO were illegal and unconstitutional, and although the program officially ended in April 1971, many critics continue to voice the opinion that it had a lasting and damaging effect on the FBI's culture. We've seen that throughout its long history, the FBI has inevitably had its share of gaffes and controversies, but the fact remains that it's a vital institution, one which plays a critical role in the day-to-day safety of millions of Americans. And for all of the secretiveness the Bureau has been associated with, some of it more necessary than we will ever know, in many ways the FBI is remarkably transparent. For example, if you want to find out if the FBI has a file on you, it's easy to do so, and you can even see a copy of it. All you have to do is ask. There are many websites that can help you out with the request, but it's actually rather simple. Just fill out a certification of identity form available on the Bureau's website, then type up a short email requesting your file. Make sure to state the maximum amount you're willing to pay to process the request. This is just in case your file happens to be lengthy, because the first 100 pages are free, so a small amount in the neighborhood of $20 should suffice. Then send the email to foipa@ic.fbi.gov with the subject line Privacy Act Request. The request may take a while to process. It is the federal government after all. But before too terribly long, you'll be privy to what, if any dirt, the Bureau happens to have on you.